Good evening and welcome to Resolutions for Recovery. This show is dedicated to exactly that, resolutions for recovery. Substance use disorder is a brain disease. It is not a moral failing. And recovery is possible, and there is always hope. And we're highlighting, we've been highlighting with Dr. O'Shaughnessy, with Good Sam Hospital, the Sherpa program, which Thomas's Hope is very proud to be involved with, Family Children's Association, with Catholic Health Systems right now, bringing peer recovery coaches into the emergency room to do crisis intervention with people struggling with substance use and their families. And tonight my special guests are Crystal Stoddard, Amo, Maury, and my daughter Jennifer Lynn Roach. I'm using her middle name tonight for reasons that we don't even have to go into, but any parent will know why. So proud to be working with you guys. And really, Amo and Crystal are the peers working with the recovery, and Jennifer and I are peers working with the family. So we know that the whole family is affected by substance use disorder, but I will also be proud to say that we are interchangeable with any of the persons or people going through this process. So Amo, this is your first time here, so we're going to ask you, how has your experience been?
Yeah, and thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to come and sit with these lovely people and chat. My experience over the last 90 days in the Sherpa program specifically has been really powerful. You know, a lot of times when we talk about in staff meetings or when we're talking to other members of the hospital staff about a success story, it's hard to pick one because there's been a lot. There's been a lot of successes, and that's really important to recognize, and also very important to recognize any of the flaws in our treatment system that have been highlighted. So it's been really powerful, not only with the individual work that we're doing, but also in the sort of broader picture of what we're trying to accomplish, of making a dent at this opioid epidemic and substance use as a whole.
So it's interesting because the data has always come back from hospitals that people, or, you know, and I'm going to use the terminology that they use that I correct always, those people don't want treatment.
Yeah.
And we are, 99% successful in engagement? So patients struggling with substance use disorder, because I'm not going to use the word those, do want help, but you need to meet them where they are in a language that is respectful to a human being and not being treated as those people.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. Most of the time we find that people do want treatment. The vast majority of the time, actually, we find that people do want treatment, and that there are unfortunately barriers in the way to them getting that treatment. And that needs to be really looked at and addressed. Absolutely.
On many, and there needs to be that cultural shift.
Yes.
And training to the hospital staff. Listen, anybody that works in the ED department, right? Very high stress level. Even for you that are there, it's a critical crisis time for everyone. So I understand if they don't have the time and availability to really bring somebody along, right? Because it takes time.
Yep.
And if a social worker or a nurse has 25 patients, 30 patients at any given point in time, it's hard to get that individual attention.
Yes, absolutely. It's people overworked. Overworked, absolutely. And not, well, that's actually often one of the remarks that we hear from or at least I've heard from especially nurses and social work as well, but I think especially nurses who are watching us sit by the bedside for an hour or 2 hours, 3 hours and saying, wow, you actually sit there with them. Yeah. It's what it takes. You know, it takes somebody being there for not just 20 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes, and actually being really present and committed to the individual for hours or days or weeks afterwards.
Just meeting them where they are. And engagement may not happen right away. So Crystal, do you feel the same
Oh, without a doubt. I
Yeah.
mean, I think we came in at a crucial time where we were needed. We were needed, you know,
Yeah,
a
years
long
ago.
time ago.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
you know, we're there now. And I think, you know, Amo is right on point when he says, you know, we do have that time to sit there and connect with them on a level that they need. They need to feel safe. They need to feel supported. And they need to know it's going to be okay,
Exactly.
you know, and we've been there and we've been through it.
Yeah.
You know, which is huge. And when they hear that, it's like an immediate, like, you know.
The guard comes down.
Exactly.
The guard comes down. So Jen, you know, dealing with the family, I know this when I speak to families, is no one really appreciates, if you haven't lived as a family through the insanity and the insidiousness of your loved one struggling, you really can't appreciate what a family is going through. Because I know for me, I heard things like, oh, you just need to take his cell phone away. Oh, okay, yeah, that's what I need to do. Not that, you know, my jewelry and money is being stolen right now and I don't know what's going on in my house. No, but if I take his cell phone away, that's certainly going to cure the issue at hand. So what have your responses really been from family members?
Everyone's been really receiving of what we have to say, and I think that it allows, we almost give a family member like the permission to breathe, even though they didn't need it from us, they did in
Yeah.
a way, you know, like to know that it's not your disease and you're living in it, but you have to like disconnect from it in order to help yourself and the person struggling.
Yes.
So I think that everyone's been really receiving and that it's really necessary
Yeah.
to get everyone on a road to recovery, because you can, you know, go and get help, and then if you come home to an unhealthy environment, it's not conducive for anybody.
Especially
stay on the right track.
for a healthy recovery, right?
Right.
For the person struggling with substance use, they can't go back to the same people, places, and things. And if there's dysfunction, and you know what you find with mom and dad and family is, well, did you go to a meeting today? As soon as someone comes home, did you go to a meeting? You know, training them. You have your path, and they have their path, and let's try to reunite everybody in a very healthy, productive way. And it may not be healthy for the recovery to come home to the household at that point, right?
Yeah, sometimes there's, you know, maybe substance use at home
Right.
that from someone else,
Correct.
you know, that's not okay.
I think even the environment could be triggering.
Right, absolutely.
where
Sometimes
they
it's
used to
just a
use.
chaotic home, or right.
Where they used to use.
there, and
And if when I go home, I can be just as manipulative
course.
as that behavior doesn't change.
right, and if you're going home unsupported, it's not going to work, you know. So if a family is just not getting it, or they're not willing to understand the disease, then the person probably shouldn't go home, because it's not going to help them. It's not healthy
Yeah.
for anyone.
You know, and I've brought that forward to actually OASIS, the Office of Alcohol and Substance Abuse, and all their treatment providers. No one ever asked me when Thomas went in, no one said, you know, you're an integral part of his recovery. We'd like to involve you and your family in education separately from Thomas. So, you know, can you be here 3 days a week? I would have been there 7 days a week. But nobody even ever asked. Or if they asked me and I said, well, that's not my disease, that's his disease, well, then you as a provider also know, gee, that's not going to be a safe environment for him to go back to. So you have all your answers right there in an initial interview. And I feel really strongly about that. So, you know, this is providing, I think, those kind of services to families. And certainly we have to protect the new person in recovery. So what does 30 days look like to someone who's lucky enough to get 30 days?
In a treatment facility you're talking about, or what is that? Or what
Yeah,
is,
so 14 days, 30 days. What is that person feeling when they come out of treatment? Because maybe people really don't understand what they're feeling. Let their loved ones know what they're feeling after those first 14 days.
I want to just real quick before you delve into that, I want to backtrack just for a second to say that you talked about a family being that you were an integral part of the treatment. And I think that it's important to remember, even in families where there's not necessarily dysfunction or not substance use in the other family members, that even within dysfunction or not, that family systems as a whole are very intelligent, in the sense that independently as this sort of organism, it's very intelligent in the sense that it's going to come to some form of like homeostasis.
Yes.
Right? And that if it's developed this homeostasis around the individual being an addict, whether or not it's dysfunctional or functional, in some way it's tried to stabilize itself. And if we
Absolutely.
take the individual out and try and put them back, we take this puzzle piece out and change the puzzle piece and try and put it back into this puzzle, even if it wasn't not necessarily dysfunctional, if we don't change the puzzle, then we don't, ultimately the work that we did on the puzzle piece is not really relevant because it doesn't fit into the puzzle of where it's trying to go back to. So speaking as somebody in recovery who's lucky enough to have a family that did a lot of self-work and realized that they were ultimately equally as responsible for the well-being of the family system as any one individual was, I think it's just so important that we address that
And
family,
that's
that family
perfectly
piece.
said. Perfectly said.
Yeah.
You know, working with a family right now, that mom is very engaging on becoming well, and she doesn't fit. She's the one that doesn't fit into the puzzle anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yep.
recognizing, wow, I can't change them. Anybody else, so we have to do what's necessary for her to maintain her own sanity at this point. So very well put. So, but I want you to recall 14 days or 28 days when you were early in recovery.
Right. So the first 14 days, I mean, you're still kind of clouded. You know, you're just, I mean, for myself, I was coming off of hard drugs, opiates, heroin. So the first 14 days were very uncomfortable. And that's nothing compared to, you know, how long I used. You know, so if you take an individual and remove them and their substance for only 14 days and you expect this whole person to come home, that's not going to happen. That's not reality.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people do believe that, oh, just fix the kid, fix the person who's abusing the drug, and everything will go back to normal. In 14 days, people want this miracle to happen, you know, and that's not the truth. You know, it's a lifetime. It's something that we're going to do forever. But if you go, you know, even if you get 30 days, it's still 30 days removed, which is excellent.
Yes.
And amazing. You know, but in that 30 days, that individual maybe for the first time in their life realizing who they are or what they like or anything. You know, they're just
What they don't like.
What they don't like, and they're getting a sense of
Yeah.
who they are.
And
you know?
feeling.
And feeling. And
Probably
maybe
for the first time in a long
in
time.
a long time. So it's very crucial for the family, I think, to get well, because a lot of families, I don't think, know what the individual is actually going through or how much it affects them.
Yeah.
You know?
And that is perfect because, right? So just like any other disease, okay, so well, you're treating them. So they're going to come home and they're going to be okay. They're going to be okay. And we'll be good. And we won't have to talk about this anymore.
Right.
So it's that gorilla in the room, right? It's that big, and that little gorilla gets really big really fast.
And I think we have to, looking back at myself, I was so vulnerable, so incredibly vulnerable for a long time. I mean, months and months, and to a certain extent, even now with multiple years, but really during that early time, so vulnerable. And it's vulnerable because the brain's way of keeping itself alive, or its perceived way of keeping itself alive, the drug that was ultimately treated the same way as other basic needs like hunger or need for sleep. When you feeling overwhelmingly tired or just so hungry, and that experience is the same on a neurochemical level. And so we need intensive support even after, like oftentimes the belief is go away for 30 days, come back, like Crystal mentioned,
Yeah.
come back fixed or come back whole. And the truth is that it's that especially in that time that they need increased support or very, very high level support. It really does take a village of support. You need just so much support in that time, because not due to a person's unwillingness or undesire to stay clean, because oftentimes that's there. Oftentimes
Yes.
the person wants it as much as they want to breathe, but without the support, then the brain will just overwhelm itself.
Yeah.
And it's really prominent, like working with families, to see that they don't understand that at all. Because I will get phone calls all the time, like, I just got a call, they're in program, why are they still talking like this? Or, why aren't they saying this yet? Or, and it's like, okay, take a second.
Yeah.
The person's been using for 5 years. Do you expect this to change in a week? The brain has been thinking one way for so many years that it changes, right? And we see that on neurological scans. Your brain changes, and it's going to take a while for it to come back, and for your, like, everything to shoot
Yeah.
differently, and for you to get into a new habit and
New
a healthy
patterns.
habit.
Yeah.
And it's important for loved ones to understand that, especially while they're in treatment. You have this perfect time where they can talk over the phone, but it's safe because the person struggling has support in their
Yes.
treatment center, and the family is not, they're not gonna be able to call over and over again or,
Yeah.
attack. It's a very safe place to find out, how do I do this?
When I think about, like, last year, my grandfather had a stroke, and the protocol for that is similar in a way to what we might see with addiction, right? Like, so he has this stroke, this medical emergency, goes to the hospital, he stays in an intensive treatment inpatient facility for X amount of days or weeks. He comes out, and the goal then is somewhat intensive physical therapy for the next year, and understanding that you're going to see significant changes, and it's important to maintain that intensive support, because the next week, 6 weeks, 6 months are going to show marked improvements if you do this physical therapy.
Right.
And nobody's surprised at that. Nobody's like, oh my God, you have to do physical therapy for a year? Like, what's wrong with
It's
you?
expected.
Right, it's just expected, and it's a norm.
expected.
Like, okay,
Yes.
this is just what I do now. I have this experience, and now I have to go through this treatment if I want to see the best possible outcomes for myself.
Right.
Is it possible he could have recovered without that? Yes, but chances are way, way better if he goes along with treatment.
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
So I
yeah.
think treatment in today's world is changing. It is changing, and people are demanding that it changes, and we have to step up. But I think where treatment really fails is insurance companies notoriously are not paying for treatment. But where is the step down? There needs to be a step down. The discharge plan can't be go to 90 meetings in 90 days, because certainly someone leaving there, they may not have a car, they may not have family, they may not have the support to get them there. And what does that even mean? What is 90 meetings in 90 days? And we have multiple pathways to recovery now. So a 12-step fellowship may be great for 50% of the people, but for 50% of the people it may not be. So meeting them where they are, supporting them, right, with housing, with intensive outpatient, with whatever it is that they need to do, right? And that has not been spoken about. People used to be in church basements, if they were lucky enough to get to a church basement.
I think that's what's so important about the work that we're doing. We're doing peer work.
Yes.
We are there when they can't get to a meeting or they don't want to choose the 12-step fellowship as their source of recovery. We're able to meet them where they're at, that, like you said, and we're able to support them on whatever journey they choose to take, or maybe create a recovery plan with them, whatever they need in order to not put a substance in their body.
When it's self-directed for any one of us,
Right.
and you are empowered and supported to do that, you're going to work your plan. When a plan is forced on you in any way, shape, or form, and this is just human nature in general, right? What happens? Well, I don't want to do that. That doesn't really work for me. I don't like that. I don't like the way this is making me feel. So it's easy to disengage because it didn't work for me. So I can blame it on you because you're making me do that.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
But when I've committed, when I've said the plan out loud, it's a much different feel for that person then too. Right? Even for families. You know,
Yes.
some people don't want to go to Naranon and Al-Anon, and 12-step fellowships are going to have to start to change. You know, unfortunately, this epidemic has created this very young population, and this very young population doesn't want to go to a 12-step fellowship meeting with people maybe being not so accepting of medicine-assisted treatment and saying, well, you're not really in recovery. And what is, you know, and that, again, shame and stigma and beating someone down is maybe not where they need to be at that moment in time. And listen, kids, young people too, like to text. They like to be online. Online meetings right now is unbelievable. That you could be sitting anywhere and dial in and be at a meeting with a facilitator and everything else. And
Which is phenomenal.
which is phenomenal. So meeting people again where they are. What other pathways do you know of, Amo?
Great. I think also too, really quickly, it's important, you said meeting people where they're at, because for a long time, the question, I think for a lot of people has been, well, does somebody have to hit rock bottom to recover? And unfortunately, what we're finding due to the opioid epidemic is that rock bottom is oftentimes 6 feet under.
Yeah.
And people don't have time to hit that rock bottom.
Right.
So for myself, I know I can speak personally on the efficacy of peer services. So I worked with a recovery coach really intensively. And I think peers are kind of scoffed at a lot of times in the recovery world, which is unfortunate because they've been implemented very, very effectively in 2 other huge populations, veterans and mental health challenges. So we've seen a lot of efficacy of them there, and we're now starting to see the efficacy of peers in the recovery world. For me, working with although a 12-step program was a part of my recovery, it certainly was not the end-all be-all. And I guess I can't say certainly because I don't have a control of my life to check, but I can say chances are not good that I would have ended up where I am today in long-term recovery were it not for intensive peer services. The other thing that I feel very strongly about is medication-assisted treatment, and I don't even mean that in terms of the classic sort of Suboxone, methadone, Vivitrol, although Vivitrol was a very important factor for me. It worked because I had all of this other support,
Yes.
but also in terms of addressing underlying mental health challenges. Like I was just blessed to work with a phenomenal psychiatrist who was able to take a creative out-of-the-box approach at how to identify one of my big relapse triggers, which was panic attacks, and work with them in a way that I was still able to have quality of life without having to put a needle in my arm to numb that experience out. So peer services, properly addressing my mental health challenges, the co-occurring disorder, and were both really important for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's, so well said. And having worked with veterans up at St. Joseph's Treatment Facility up in Saranac, they actually have a year-long program, and it's a house where veterans are in. And let me tell you, they are tough. They're a tough group of people that are not easy to penetrate their world. So I had to kind of diss their football teams to get them really talking to me, which was very interesting, but they kind of let their guard down. But if you are not a veteran and can't understand what they've lived through and the camaraderie that they share with each other, they don't want to hear from you. And I can really appreciate where they come from. That's so peers.
And they're not tough because they're inherently tough people.
No.
They're tough because it's survival.
It's
They're
survival,
tough because
exactly.
it's survival. And it's the same thing with those other special populations.
Exactly.
It's just survival. It's nothing
It is
personal.
survival.
It's nothing.
It's not that they don't want to let you in, but don't tell me you understand how I feel, because you don't understand how I feel.
Yep.
And right now we're doing some grief recovery, grief resolution therapy, and there's a show that I did with Gwen Us, who does the therapy, and I have a group, and Thomas's Hope is bringing this to other populations. But learning, there's over 40 different types of grief that are involved, and it can be grief over not using anymore. That's
That's a loss.
That's a loss.
Big loss.
But even for me to learn, and I've said to parents, I know how you feel. No, I don't know how you feel. Now I know. I say things just a little bit differently. It's because it's how you're going to receive it. I can only imagine how you feel. I can share with you how I felt when we went through similar situations. Wow. When I even say that out loud, I hear the difference inside me, how that makes me feel. So I can only imagine how it's going to make somebody else feel when being met with those words.
Language is very important.
Yeah,
It's
and
crucial.
all
You
language. You can turn that on any
Yes.
facet of life in general. You know, like I have a 4-year-old autistic child. If you were to say to me, like, I get it, Jen, but you don't, right? Because you don't have one.
Right.
But it's even like with losing a brother, there's like a look. Like you just know when someone's gone through the same thing as you, it comes down to a look. And we say it at the hospital all the time, right? That it's like once you say, I've been here, it's a look. The
Yeah.
room changes, the aura changes,
So
everything.
we're gonna pick that up. We'll be right back after this message.
My age is 18 years old and my name is Evan.
My name is Sean and I'm 19 years old.
My name is Justin, I'm 16.
My name is Angelica. I'm 18 years old.
Marijuana, and I was 13 years old.
Marijuana, and my age was 13.
The first drug I ever tried was marijuana, and I was 12 years old.
It was marijuana and I was 11 years old.
Yes, and that escalated to promethazine, lean.
I began to take pills like Xanax, Percocets.
I began using other substances such as pills and alcohol.
I then went on to cocaine and pills and quickly progressed to heroin. I was 13 years old when I first started using heroin. I had like aspirations of going to like an Ivy League school, and that quickly, within like a year or two, changed. I stopped going to my classes. I stopped going to school altogether eventually. All my friends were kind of just dropping me.
I started getting in trouble in school, eventually kicked out. I got in trouble with the law a lot.
I wasn't really hanging out with a lot of sober people, just people that use. I overdosed at 15. I've been at Outreach for 5 months. Outreach honestly really helps you. It shows that you're honestly worth something. And it's possible to become sober if you put in progress. But it's not just gonna be handed to you, you really have to want to change. Inpatient, you can't just leave. You stay here and you have to deal with it. That's what I feel like a lot of kids need.
In a long-term facility, the counselors get to know the resident better, and they get to actually work with them more than in a short-term 28-day facility. And it really gives kids a chance to work on themselves rather than being rushed through a program, just to be thrown back into life, going back into the same old bad habits that they were doing before.
Coming in here, I couldn't believe how long I would have to be here, but after a couple months, like, you know, talking to counselors, I kind of came to the realization that, like, I need a lot of time and work to repair everything I've done.
The things that we get taught here, you know, it really does help you in life, and it gives you a different perspective. It's very important for a kid to have a family involvement in treatment so they don't think they're alone in this. We communicate on a better basis than how we used to. We understand each other more. And that was from the help of outreach.
They come every Wednesday night for support group. They come to a group every other week.
They come to peer support group to discuss their problems also. My relationship honestly has got a lot better. Because I remember my mom used to never want to say anything to me because she would be scared of my reaction. I'm starting to realize in here, like, I really have to take advantage of the fact that I have her still.
When I was about 14 is when my parents realized that I had several different problems, such as behavioral issues, and the behavioral issues kind of stemmed from my drug use. I began caring less about myself and others. Outreach has really made me realize how important family is. If I was out of state in a program where my parents were not involved, I would have never been able to strengthen my relationship with them. My father told me that I've inspired him to make changes in his life, and that meant a lot to me. I've never heard my dad be inspired by something before, and I was just proud that it was me.
Welcome back to Resolutions for Recovery. So Jen, you were just, we were just talking off camera too, but we won't go into that because we're allowed to do that too. You know,
I totally lost my train of thought, so
okay, so
I'm out.
So you had a really awesome recovery coach that helped you get through everything. And I think, so at the Sherpa program is kind of, we're in the battlefield. So it's really crisis intervention, really more so. We on the family side, actually, you know, I've been working with families now really the whole 90 days that we've been involved and bringing them along. Not all families. Fortunately, we have a few that are staying engaged,
Yeah,
right?
and you guys get a lot of peers that, I mean, you might have a dropout time, right? But they've come back,
Yep.
which is awesome.
Certainly.
To have, like, it's so important, the first impression, you know, and if you feel comfortable and there's that time where we don't have to use rock bottom, but that time where you're like, I need to do something right now, you know, and you remember Crystal or Amo, you know,
But
because
we-
your experience was so warm.
Yeah.
How awesome is
I
that
think,
that they'll
Crystal,
call
you
you?
had that experience just recently.
Yeah, actually, yesterday I had
Yeah.
somebody reach out to me who I had helped a couple times, actually. I had helped back in March and then again in April. And then he reached out to me yesterday saying, hey, you know, thank you so much for being there. Like, I really need help again. You know, because, and I said, listen, I'm always here for you no matter what. You know, because it doesn't matter how many times people fall.
It doesn't.
It matters how many times they
Relapse
get up.
Yes.
or remission, or, you know, it's all part of any
Right.
disease. We talk about cancer, we talk about any disease. We can even talk about diabetes.
Yeah.
Does someone follow a diet and exercise and their medication to a T? No, we don't. But we don't criticize or judge them when something happens. But why, with substance use, is that an issue then?
Right. It's actually, I think it's great that you brought that up because people oftentimes use this idea that we have free will to support the choice model or the character defect or the moral model of looking at addiction, which we know is just not true, but it's still really pervasive. And what that is that essentially you have a moral failing, you're
Yes.
making a choice. And so in the same way that you're choosing to use drugs, you could choose to not use drugs. But we know that even if we said that's true and didn't look at any of the hundreds of studies at the brain chemistry, even if we just said, yeah, sure, it's your choice, it still doesn't change the fact that people should be, that their treatment options should be limited because of that, for the same reason that getting treatment for a sexually transmitted disease or for diabetes that's due to lifestyle choices essentially, or heart conditions that weren't genetic, predisposed, essentially is saying, well, no, you made a choice to have sex without a condom, and so now sorry for you. You know, we don't work like that anymore. We stopped doing that a long time ago, and the
But-
fact that it's still happening around addiction is just stunning.
And
horrible.
I've brought this up in many a meeting. You know, if you're going to say that it's a moral failing, that it's your choice, then the same person, that 300-pound diabetic with heart disease that comes into the emergency room, you know what, we're not going to hit you, we're not going to shock you again, we're not going to start your heart again because you didn't do A, B, and C, so we can't help you. Then that's parity to me.
Right.
That's parity.
All or nothing.
It's all or nothing. If you want to call it all or nothing, then let's go across the board for every disease. So, pick your words wisely.
I just had a woman who was, who I helped at the hospital, who just kept saying, "Why are you being so nice to me? Why are you being so nice to me?" And I would imagine this is probably a pretty common thing that we hear across the board. And it was just stunning to me because I'm a nice person, but I'm not that nice. And so what that was really speaking to, more than my kindness, was the systemic oppression that she's experienced for the last X amount of years.
Yes.
And you wonder why people are frustrated and they don't want to go to treatment because it hasn't worked for them in the past and because they've been told they were a bad person essentially all their lives. I was just, got her some water. Why are you so nice to me? Because you're a human being and that's what you deserve. You know what I mean? No matter what your actions were or what you might be struggling with.
You're still another person that is worthy of love and respect, period.
Absolutely.
That's all it can be that simple. And I remember Thomas often saying, "Well, you think I am." And I said, "I don't think that. Do you think that of yourself?" And yes, that's what he did think of himself, because society had told him he was a failure.
Yep.
He was bad all of a sudden, and he wasn't bad. So, all that miscommunication and missed opportunity, really, for him to feel good about himself, is just, I never want anybody to feel like that again. Because it's just that, it's that miscommunication.
Yeah, if we can try to always bring things back to the simplest way, like human nature. If when you were a kid, you were always told that, I don't know, you were hyper. When you get older, you have this idea. It doesn't always have to be a bad thing, but you just have this idea that you're like this person, and it's anything like that, it's human nature. And especially with the disease of addiction, especially in the hospital, I think that depending on the situation, we're naturally in a flight or fight mode, right? And that's a natural reaction, and it should be okay. But most people looking in will say, "Oh, they're so rude," or "Look at them yell," or "Why are they flipping out?" and be so judgmental, but you don't understand what this person's body is doing to them right now, or their mind, or how they've been treated, or what their last experience was. And all it takes is 1 second for you to just sit back and say, "I don't understand, so I'm gonna not say anything."
Right.
And if we could do that, or if that's the thought we can get out,
if that's the only thing that we can do is, even when someone cuts you off on the road, and I'm a financial advisor and I've mentored many a person, and they'll call someone and they'll go, "Oh, they were so mean." Go, "You know what? Make a note that they weren't receptive today, because here's what I know. You have no idea if they just had a fight with their husband, wife, companion, whoever. You don't know if they had a death in the family. You don't know what's going on in their life." And I showed them, I call people back and go, "You weren't having a real good day the last time that we spoke. Is everything all right?" Bam. "Oh, I'm so sorry that happened that day, but yeah, that's exactly what was going on." And some people are just rude, so it is one or the other. But you know what? I think it's so much easier just to give the other person the benefit of the doubt. So no criticism, no judgment. A lot of people come back at you with an explanation of, of what you think. I'm not judging you. I'm not criticizing you. Nothing like that. I'm just stating what I'm feeling or seeing right now.
Well, and the issue that we come up with in the systemic stigma is that it sets the stage for that to not work, essentially, for when you're say, this is what I'm seeing, this is just how it is that I'm seeing it, it doesn't work. In other words, if somebody has a belief system that's come into place, like you mentioned, or you mentioned, that's because they've been told that they were a failure all their life.
Absolutely.
When you present somebody with facts or a witness of a way that goes against their belief system, then they're either forced to throw out their belief system or they're forced to throw out the facts. So like a lot of times we'll hear treatment providers or family members say, but like, I don't understand why they can't understand this. Like, it's so obvious. Like, I have
Right.
this concrete piece of information that clearly goes against it. But if we look at ourselves, like, if somebody gave me concrete evidence that the moon was made out of cheese or that the sky wasn't blue, I'd have a really, like, I'd want to sit with that for a while and be like, well, I see the evidence, but like all my life, I've
Yes.
known that the sky is blue.
Exactly.
So I'm having a hard time computing this, essentially. And so we have to be patient with people
Yes.
when we understand that something that may seem really obvious is actually, it has nothing to do with whether it's obvious or not. It has to do with whether or not the belief system that our culture has cultivated
Right.
around this person is in line with the information that we're giving them. And if it's not, we have to be prepared to let them sit with that for a little while,
Yeah.
or phrase it in a different way, or help them examine their belief systems. And so sometimes they're just presenting this information and saying, well, they just need to understand.
Yeah, that doesn't.
Not
Well, you
effective.
know what's
Yeah, it's
interesting
not.
in dealing with families too is you get them to believe that their person, has a disease, that it's not a moral failing, that this is what it is. And in the next breath, they'll be like, but I can't believe they're doing this. Well, you just acknowledged with me that your loved one, has a problem and that, we have some issues going on here. But yet you want them to think as if nothing, just because you want it to be doesn't mean it's going to happen. So we either admit and hold on to that there are issues and it's going to take time, or you want them fixed like that. And this doesn't happen. So yes, you need to be patient. You need to take a step back and you need to examine what's going on inside of you, because you can't be both ways.
Yep.
And I find that the biggest thing with families is they just need education.
Yeah.
They just need to know and
And
understand.
they need empowerment.
Well, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
So once you have some knowledge and understanding of a thing in the box, it's easier to have a little power to think outside the box and understand their family member, and yeah, it takes time.
It
And
takes time. It takes
But
time
both
and
are-
energy and effort.
Yeah, and both are really important because, like, let's say you educate the person, because most people are affected by substance use in some way or the other, right? It's prevalent enough that we know that it's being affected, it's just not being swept under the carpet as much. So if let's say your uncle was always really angry when he got drunk and would always hit you every time you spoke, and so you now have an idea about an alcoholic that's been formed by a very early experience in your life or an intimate experience in your life. And so let's say you get educated about what addiction is. Knowledge is one thing, but again, you now have to reframe your view of your uncle, because he can't just be the bad person anymore. He has to be the person that's suffering with the disease. So you now have to decide, you're going to reframe this relationship or you're going to just throw out the information. So as much as we want to educate them, it's also the
Yes.
empowerment to say, how are we going to deal with the fact that your son is using, but you've held this long-term belief about an alcoholic or an addict?
Yes.
Because most everybody has exposure
Yes.
to it in one way or another, friend,
Right.
coworker, family
Right.
member.
Oh, without a doubt. And
even
if they
in the news,
if they don't
they'll always
admit,
add,
Right.
Yeah.
To
that
it.
they were on drugs or whatever.
Yeah.
And that promotes the stigma.
well, so last week I was with Phil Valentine, who is going to actually be on the show, who is the Recovery Coach Academy and CCAR in Connecticut, and they have a phenomenal hospital program. But we had a big, long discussion about stigma, and he said, how do you get rid of stigma? Don't call it stigma anymore. Show what recovery is. Show what hope is. Don't keep going to that. Just we do have to move away and be just what does recovery look like? We can stay in this really nasty place, because that's what it is. It's a really nasty place. Nobody ever wakes up and says, you know what, I think I'd like to kill myself at the age of 21. I'll use Thomas and be, and just destroy my family. I think that's what I'd like to do. Said no one ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to be an alcoholic and over the next 40 years bring my body to a place, destroy my family, make them frightened of me, destroy everything that I've ever built. No one says that with the right mind. No.
And I think you said something so powerful about like recovery. So many people know what addiction is. So many people talk about the disease. So many people talk about overdoses. Like that's all you see in the headlines. You never see the word recovery. You never see that people are recovering. You know, you never hear about the good side of it. You only hear about the bad side of it. So that's why I love even coming here, because we do have this moment to show people that it is possible and to give them that glimmer of hope, and let them know that recovery is possible,
We have to show a different view.
There's another side
Even
of it.
this show used to be called Long Island in Crisis. Well,
Right.
now it's not. Let's talk about There's always, when there's a problem, there are solutions to a problem. This is a very intricate solution, and it has to be very multifaceted. And one size does not fit all for anything, right?
Right.
One size is never going to cure what ails society and everything else. And that really is, to me, when we talk about the average age of onset for a boy is age 10 now to have their first drink or substance, and 11 and a half for a girl. Well, society, and that includes everyone. So it's hysterical when you talk to groups of people and they go, well, society. I go, I have to tell you a secret. I'm going to stop you. We're society in this room. So what are you planning to do in your community? Because if every community started inside their community, then we would see a shift change nationally, state-wise, everything. But it starts this big.
Well, I want to talk actually a little bit about that. So I have the national average beat out by a year. So I started using when I was 9 years old, right? And so this idea of like, what do you do? Like you said earlier, that this experience of when you're asking us about 30 days, what does it feel like during those 30 days? And trying to identify a way that I can have fun or experience pleasure without substances. People were like, well, what did you used to do for fun? I didn't. There was no used to. The entire experience that I had as sort of a self-thinking, conscious person was under the influence. So when I worked with, a recovery coach, and part of the cool thing about Pure Services is like showing people how to have fun, that you can have fun. So like things that you wouldn't really, that seem like so obvious to somebody looking outside. Well, what do you mean? How do you have fun, or what brings you pleasure or joy? But these things have to be taught. And relearned. And it's way easier to relearn them alongside somebody who's also had to relearn them.
Yes. It's so perfectly put, because how do you even remember what made you,
Yeah, I didn't have it. There was nothing to remember, in the sense that the person even if I did have things at the age of 8 or 7 that I was like, oh, this makes me happy, they're not things that even would apply
They're not
anymore.
appropriate,
I'm a
because you're not
22-year-old
really
young man. I'm not a 7-year-old boy anymore.
It's going to be a little weird if we see you playing with Tonka trucks in the hallway.
And I do like my my toy cart, but it's not really.
It's not really
true for me
appropriate anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're right. What brings you, what is at the center of your music, art? We don't know what it
And
is.
so many people don't know. I was just with a gentleman today who's 21 years old, and I said, what are your hobbies? He just recently came into recovery, and he said, I don't know. Like, he had no idea. And I said, okay, so let's figure that out together. Let's go on this journey together.
Right.
Let's try different things.
Let's try different things, and something.
And he was like, okay,
Yeah.
like just something so little, because if you do think about it, you're going back to the mindset as well as somebody from when they first started using drugs. So,
Absolutely.
So now I'm talking to a little boy who's now excited, to go out and go to Splish Splash or whatever,
Isn't that
Totally.
amazing to see, so let's talk about Thrive a little bit. So Thrive for us here on Long Island is the first recovery center in Hauppauge, New York. And it's just that. It's for people whether you're struggling or not, because you can come in and meet one of these two great people and start your road to recovery, or someone in early recovery, or someone in sustained recovery that wants to give back and give service too. So what a great thing. And they are popping up, and they should be popping up in everyone's community. But how do you go have fun? Well, you know what? For a 21-year-old man, their friends maybe go out drinking and doing things on the weekend. And I'm not condoning it, judging it, or anything else.
But that's reality.
That's reality,
Sure.
and that's okay.
Right.
For them, they don't have a problem with substance use.
Right.
But for someone that struggles, that's not a safe environment. So what do you go out and do and have fun?
Totally.
Yeah, I even said to the guy today, and I said, yeah, you know, we have sober parties here. We do like sober St. Patrick's Day, sober Super Bowl. And he was like, what's a sober party? Like, he honestly, like, you know, and that's new.
Those
and
two
I
words
said,
don't go together
And I
in
said,
his
listen,
mind.
we have a really good time here, you know, because you can have fun in sobriety. But for myself, I had to learn that because I thought, you know, I gave up drinking and partying. Like, what is my life going to be? Netflix and sitting home alone every day? Like, I had no idea.
Right,
what
which
it
like
was.
if it's gonna be that, like, I didn't get sober to stop using drugs and alcohol. I got sober to have joy in my life, right? The drugs and alcohol were just sort of a barrier in the way to that joy.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm not living a joyous life, then why am I, like, I need to take a really hard look at what I'm doing in my life, in my recovery, because I don't want to live miserable, right? And my belief was that when I stop using, I'm going to be miserable, essentially. Like,
Right.
I'm going to be, I'll be better. I won't be in trouble with the law. I won't all these things, but I'm never going to have fun like I used to. And it's actually quite the opposite. I had more fun in recovery than I ever did in using.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
So being present, right? Really being present and feeling joy and feeling pain and feeling just to feel is okay too, right? And people have no idea what that means. Even families, the same thing. People will say, I don't even know what it means to have a peaceful, relaxing Sunday with no drama going on.
Right. So like you
Right.
said, Thrive, that's what we want to cultivate.
That's
Right,
what we're
we
called,
want to
right?
cultivate this sense of a tribe. We want to cultivate a sense of a place that's safe, but also a place there's a lot of places that are safe in the recovery field that aren't also fun and also
Right.
like passionate. So that's what we want.
Yeah,
to cultivate.
so to watch that passion ignite on something that someone, it's like watching a baby, it's like watching Faith, discover a butterfly outside for the very first time. It's like
Totally.
watching that light come on and being like, wow, this is awesome.
I'm working with someone right now who their loved one is in a center, and she keeps calling me, and she's like, well, he keeps talking about, like, let's say, yesterday it was how different food tastes. Like, what are they giving him something? I'm like, do you understand that, he's been this way for so long, and he has not tasted a real piece of meat in a while, like, these are all different things. She's like, and he gets on the phone and he won't stop talking. I'm like, well, he has a lot to say.
Right.
There's a lot coming in, a lot needs to go out, like, everything
Right.
is a new experience, and it's amazing.
Yeah,
It's unbelievable.
That's the beauty of recovery, right?
And it's the best thing to be, like, on the journey for. It makes you so happy.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's exciting.
It's exciting.
Really exciting. Really exciting.
It's rewarding, and people often say, well, you just do this to make me feel better. This does not make me feel better. This should make you feel better that I am stepping up. This doesn't change anything in my world. My son is still not here. My son is still dead. But if I can change the world for my grandchildren, for your grandchildren, then that's what we need to do. Because someone needs to change the direction of whatever it is that's going on. Because that's, to think that at 9 years old that you thought that that's what you needed to do. And, just as a societal thing, working with Kim Laube of Hugs and doing prevention and, when she works with kids and when I've been present with her, every adult will tell young people, you need to have great self-esteem, you need to do this, you need to be able to do that. But no one shows them how to have that. We build young people up now from the outside. You have to have the perfect selfie, you have to have all
yeah.
these likes immediately on Instagram, or I got to take that down. We're building young from the outside. It has nothing to do with what you see here. We need to build from the inside out, and that's, to me, what recovery is now. Is from the inside out, and that's the language of recovery, of hope.
Absolutely. I was teaching kids yoga for a little while. And it would just break my heart to see these kids, because I didn't know. Looking back at myself, I didn't really know, but I'd see these kids 9, 8, 9, 10 years old, which is, people are shocked that that's the age, but that's more and more, that's what you'll hear. Like you said, that's really is the average. And I see these kids, and it's really just heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking, but
yeah.
Kids know so much at way too early of an age, and they are bombarded 24/7 with too much. And you can turn on the TV and see, for a 7-year-old, a 6-year-old, very inappropriate language, inappropriate content, and somehow adults are forgetting that although your 10-year-old may not look like a 10-year-old, or you think that they should be capable of processing very adult subjects, they're not capable of processing very adult subjects.
Well, let's talk about our young men and women in the teenage years then also, because where do you think I got as a 9-year-old? Where do you get pot?
Yeah.
Right?
Where do you get a beer?
Right.
Usually from older sibling, older cousin, older friend, older someone. And they really didn't have any idea either. They really had no idea. There was only 3 or 4 years older than me, 12, 13 years old. And so we're just, boys will be boys, and this is, what are we teaching them too? Where is I don't think I had any really role models growing up that didn't involve drugs or alcohol. I don't think I ever had anybody who was like, no, you can actually do this without. Where did that belief come from that I can't have fun without it?
And what's interesting is, speaking to parents, and they go, this is exactly how everyone says it. My kid isn't doing that heroin stuff. I go, oh, really? They're just drinking and smoking pot. And how old are they? 14, 15, whatever they say. And I go, and you think that that's okay? Well, kids are going to do it, so I might as well let them. So do you not read the science that's behind all of that? Because that went out a long time ago, that mindset. That should have gone out a long time ago. Because where do you think all the patients are coming from? Is the only thing that I can say to people. And coming into summer again, so we will say that. Coming into summer, and last year, you can find the shows with John Venza, who is the director of the adolescent treatment facility on Long Island. Educate yourself, parents. It's not okay. It's time to have a conversation, and it's time to educate you, and don't be their friend, be their parent. And on that note, have a great weekend. Have a great 4th of July next week. Next Wednesday is 4th of July, so happy 4th of July. And it is also, we celebrate 4th of July because my daughter was born at 11/18 on July 3rd, and that's why we set off fireworks.
Happy
Have
birthday.
a great week.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's what we told her.